Well, law enforcement seniors are adamant that police are clamping down on syndicates at Eskom. They've touted gains in nabbing coal-smuggling cartels and fuel oil schemes in Mpumalanga. But Police Minister Bheki Cele and others have no knowledge, they say, of any senior politician who's being investigated. That's after the former Eskom CEO, André Ruyter, claimed a politically connected actor that he wouldn't name was involved in organised crime linked to affairs at the power utility. Well, today, the National Police Commissioner, the head of the Hawks and the Special Investigating Unit's boss were all grilled by Parliament. The Standing Committee on Public Accounts, or Scopa, is set to pose more questions about alleged crimes at Eskom when the board appears before it tomorrow. Let's go live now to Cape Town, get a wrap of the day's events with our reporter Erin Bates. And Erin, an external investigation into Eskom also came under scrutiny today, but there are several problems with that. Take us through them.
Yes, Bheki Cele. Well, one of the most glaring problems with that is that law enforcement hasn't been able to obtain copies of that dossier, this private probe into alleged corruption, law-breaking and politically connected mafioso-style looting at Eskom. And we heard that the SIU, in fact, had sought to get a copy of this report, which it's understood that André Ruyter drew upon when making certain submissions to Scopa, but hasn't been able to get hold of one. We also heard that the Police Minister hasn't seen sight of it and that the Police Commissioner didn't have details or any information on the substance of that private report. Here's some more of what we heard from the head of the Hawks, that's General Godfrey Lebeya, on this theme earlier today.
There are currently 3 known investigations linked to Mr. Ruyter, namely an alleged poisoning case in which Mr. Ruyter is a complainant. This I will not detail it, but he is the complainant in this matter. The second one is alleged failure to lodge a Section 34 report in terms of the PRECA, as I have already outlined, in which Mr. Ruyter is cited as a suspect by Mr. Musi Maimani. And lastly, a report in terms of Section 34 of PRECA submitted on the 25th of April 2023 by a firm of attorneys on behalf of Mr. Ruyter. It is important to note that this is the first Section 34 report that was reported to the Central Reporting Office on behalf of Mr. Ruyter in relation to Eskom corruption allegations. It was received a day before Mr. Ruyter appeared before the Standing Committee on Scopa.
Well, Erin, we also heard a bit about André Ruyter and his level of cooperation, or how he's not been cooperative in trying to help law enforcement get to the bottom of these allegations.
Absolutely, and you heard there Lebeya talking about Section 34 of PRECA. The issue here is about the timing of Ruyter's sort of revelations after a controversial TV interview in terms of formal processes both in law and before the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. And one of the issues is about what Ruyter did with the information which was gleaned from this probe into Eskom and alleged cartels busy, really driving it into the ground. It sounds like, from what we heard at Scopa today, that there really hasn't been engagement between Ruyter and law enforcement agencies. And just before we go into some of that with input from Lebeya again, Bheki Cele, it's important to note that he emphasized that there's a tension here. On the one hand, Ruyter is being described as a whistleblower, someone who's blowing open the can of worms, the proverbial can of worms at Eskom in terms of politically connected players who are involved in alleged criminal activity. So he's a whistleblower in that sense, and certainly in the view of some MPs, but at the same time he's also being investigated for a perceived or potential flouting of the law in terms of what his duties were when he was the CEO of Eskom. Let's have a listen to what Lebeya had to say about the corporation and its breakdown.
That the DPCI, through the provincial head of Mpumalanga, has reached out to Mr. Ruyter immediately after his media interview to ascertain information firsthand. It's a courtesy call. It's not necessarily supposed to be done before an individual report. Mr. Ruyter declined to meet the officer, but referred him to his lawyer, who promised to talk to the officer. But unfortunately, the promise to come back to the provincial head did not materialize. So that is where we ended with the reporting from Mr. Ruyter, and the rest of the investigation will continue.
Erin, something else that was noteworthy today was the police commissioner, Fanima Smola, in fact, insisting that they've not been sitting on their hands, as it were, on the allegations made by Ruyter. But how do they back that up? Is there proof that work is being done to investigate?
There was a fair amount of that, and in fact we had a number of statistics both from Masemola and from Lebeya around efforts by the police to deal with Eskom and criminality, particularly Tembekile in Mpumalanga in terms of those coal syndicates, sham coal plants or sort of stops you could say, also fuel thieves and fuel oil thieves who've been taking vehicles and they're not actually delivering the goods as required to keep the national grid going. A number of statistics there. But it was the head of Scopa, the chair himself, who said that it was really about getting answers on Ruyter's allegations and action by law enforcement that was at issue in today's meeting. And there we didn't get a sense of a clear point-by-point strategy by law enforcement to address the Ruyter allegations. There were many questions raised about the veracity of this private probe into graft at Eskom, even Police Minister Bheki Cele raising some doubts about where it came from, who are the authors, Mutibi from the SIU saying we need to look at who's funded this and what their agenda may be. These are the kinds of questions that are likely to come up again tomorrow when we hear from Eskom's board. But as we as South Africans live with the daily toil of load shedding, never mind its cost to industry and business, clarity around the actions taken about police specifically on Ruyter fairly wanting, one could say, in terms of today's committee meeting. But we were told there's this broader strategy with Nat joints called Operation Simba, which has been ongoing since before Ruyter's flagrant claims to try and clamp down on corruption at the power utility.
Newzroom Afrika reporter Erin Bates, thank you very much for that update from Cape Town.